Germany's chancellor is facing a political storm at home and abroad. Merz is pushing the EU to expand how it uses immobilized Russian assets to support Ukraine, within what EU officials say is legally defensible. Opposition parties warned the move risks escalation and legal fallout across Europe. In Berlin's Bundestag, criticism came fast and fierce. The debate exposed deep divisions inside Germany's parliament and within the European Union itself. The session highlighted a growing rift between those who believe Ukraine must be supported at any cost and those who argue Germany's interests are being sacrificed for a conflict that cannot be won on the battlefield. The intensity of the exchanges reflected just how contentious the frozen assets issue has become. AfD lawmaker Steffen Kotre launched a blistering attack on Chancellor Merz and the EU. Kotre warned that expropriating Russian funds would amount to theft under international law. Neither the EU nor Germany are at war with Russia, Kotre said. This expropriation is an act of theft, illegal under international law. The European Union, standing as a financial center for foreign capital, will be massively damaged by this. Kotre argued that foreign investors watching Europe move against Russian state assets would question whether their own assets could be targeted in future disputes. The precedent, he warned, could undermine confidence in Europe as a safe destination for international capital. Kotre warned of potential financial consequences for Germany. If Russia were to be rightfully awarded compensation for this act of aggression, then once again only the Germans would have to pay the price, he said. The AfD lawmaker accused the federal government of using German taxpayers' money for guarantees that could backfire if legal challenges succeed. Critics warn the plan could face legal challenges and create financial exposure for EU states, especially those most tied to the assets. Germany, as the largest economy, could potentially bear the greatest burden if courts rule against the EU's approach. Kotre accused Berlin and Brussels of moralizing the war instead of ending bloodshed. He criticized statements from officials who argue that Putin must not be rewarded. Such a statement reveals the full extent of our diplomatic failure, Kotre said. When we are making efforts to bring a war to an end, it's not the moral assessment that is important, but instead the stopping of the loss of life. Moralizing while accepting deaths, that is anything but moral. The AfD lawmaker's argument reflects a broader debate in Europe, whether the goal should be Ukrainian victory or simply an end to the killing. For Kotre and his party, the answer is clear. Diplomacy should take priority over military support. AfD co-chair Tino Trupala slammed Merz's position. He said the Ukraine conflict was never Germany's war to fight. Trupala accused EU leaders of moving toward expropriating Russian state property. He warned transferring those assets to Ukraine would only add fuel to the fire. It is easier to spend other people's money than protect German interests, he said. The AfD leader pointed to what he described as a pattern of German leaders prioritizing foreign interests over domestic concerns. From energy policy to military spending, Trupala argued, ordinary Germans are paying the price for decisions made in Brussels and Washington. The AfD leader insisted his party would never back confiscation plans. He argued the move directly contradicts the needs of German citizens. Trupala said Germany should position itself as an actor for peace, not as a funder of war. He accused the government of sacrificing German interests for Ukraine's sake. The AfD's position has gained traction among voters concerned about inflation, energy costs, and the economic impact of prolonged conflict. Polls suggest a significant portion of the German public is skeptical of continued military support for Ukraine, giving the party's arguments political resonance. The debate also touched on the possibility of German troops in Ukraine. AfD representatives issued a stark warning about security guarantees that could involve German soldiers. Whoever sends boots, they will also get coffins returned, one AfD speaker said. The party accused the government of pursuing what they called a creeping entry into war. The AfD speaker argued that the chancellor had avoided answering direct questions about whether German soldiers could be deployed to Ukraine as part of security guarantees. This evasiveness, they claimed, was deliberate because the honest answer would alarm the German public. Chancellor Merz, however, has doubled down. Merz argues Europe should finalize a legally solid mechanism that uses immobilized Russian assets as leverage and potential repayment backing for Ukraine's support. We do not intend to take this step to prolong the war. We want to take it to bring this war to an end as quickly as possible, Merz said. Merz framed the asset mechanism as a pressure tactic rather than a simple war funding measure. His argument is that only by demonstrating Europe's resolve, including its willingness to use Russia's own immobilized funds against it, can Putin be brought to the negotiating table. Merz argued that current measures are insufficient. It is not enough that we dry up the revenue streams of the Russian war machine with further sanctions. It is not enough that we continue our financial support for Ukraine in Europe as before, he said. The pressure on Putin must still increase further to move him to serious negotiations. And it is precisely for this that we need the decision of the European heads of state and government. The Chancellor's position reflects a belief shared by some European leaders that Russia will only negotiate seriously when the costs of continuing the war become unbearable. Whether the asset mechanism would achieve that goal or simply harden Moscow's stance remains a matter of intense debate. Merz acknowledged concerns from EU partners. I am aware of the concerns of many governments within the European Union. I am particularly aware of the concerns of the Belgian government, in whose country a large portion of the frozen assets are located, he said. EU officials argue the plan can be structured to meet legal constraints, but Belgium and others warn it could still trigger major legal and financial blowback. Most of the roughly 210 billion euros frozen in Europe is held at Euroclear, about 185 billion euros, according to widely cited reports. Belgian officials have repeatedly warned that moving against these assets could expose the country to legal liability and damage Brussels' role as a financial hub. Slovakia's Prime Minister Robert Fico openly rejected the plan. Fico said he would not support any scheme that prolongs the war. I will not support at tomorrow's European Council meeting any solution that would lead to the provision of a military loan to Ukraine. None, Fico said. As Prime Minister, I will not support any scheme whatsoever, whether it involves frozen assets or anything else that could potentially lead to further support for the ongoing war. Fico's position represents a direct challenge to the EU's consensus-based approach. With unanimity often required for major financial decisions, Slovakia's opposition could complicate efforts to move forward with any asset-related plan. Fico argued that frozen Russian assets should be used differently. Frozen Russian assets should indeed be an integral part of a peace agreement, and they ought to be utilized based on mutual consent primarily for the comprehensive reconstruction of Ukraine itself, he said. He criticized EU leaders for rushing to decide on the assets solely to prevent these frozen assets from becoming a part of any peace agreement. For Fico, the assets represent leverage that should be preserved for negotiations, not spent before a deal is reached. His argument is that using the assets now removes a potential incentive for Russia to agree to peace terms. Fico criticized Merz after Merz made a World War II-era historical comparison in a speech about Russia's ambitions, calling it very unfortunate. I consider it a very unfortunate statement, and especially if it comes from the mouth of the German federal chancellor, Fico said. The Slovak prime minister accused certain EU leaders of being uncomfortable with peace negotiations taking place. Fico's criticism reflects broader concerns about inflammatory rhetoric. Critics argue that such comparisons make diplomacy more difficult by personalizing the conflict and eliminating any possibility of a negotiated settlement with the current Russian leadership. Fico mocked the EU's foreign policy chief Kaja Kallas, claiming her Washington trip showed the EU lacks influence. We simply have no standing as the European Union, he said, questioning Europe's influence in ongoing negotiations. The Slovak Prime Minister's critique touches on a sensitive issue for Brussels. As the United States takes a more active role in potential peace negotiations, some European leaders worry that EU interests may be sidelined. Fico's comments suggest this concern is shared beyond the traditional skeptics of EU foreign policy. Hungary's Viktor Orban went even further. He accused EU leaders of cheating and pushing reckless policies. There is an illusion which was supported by many of you in the recent 2 or 3 years, Orban said. You created, together with the liberal politicians and Brussels bureaucrats, that there is a possibility to support a war financially in Ukraine without getting the money out of the pockets of the citizens of the European Union. It was a cheat. You are cheated. Orban's accusation of cheating is characteristically blunt. He argues that European citizens were told the war could be funded through clever financial mechanisms, frozen assets, special loans, creative accounting, when in reality, taxpayers will ultimately bear the cost. Orban dismissed the frozen assets plan as an illusion. In Central Europe, nobody thought it seriously. We are not stupid. We think that if you would like to finance a war, you have to pay for it, he said. There was an illusion created by the leaders that it is possible to finance the war and reconstruction in Europe without the money in the pockets of European citizens, just based on the so-called frozen assets. It is an illusion. You will pay for it. We all will pay. It's a bad strategy, a huge mistake. The Hungarian Prime Minister's argument resonates with voters across Europe who are feeling the economic strain of inflation, energy costs, and reduced public spending. Whether fair or not, the perception that war support is costing ordinary citizens has become a political liability for pro-Ukraine governments. Orban said Hungary shares Belgium's concerns about the frozen assets plan. We have the same position like Belgium. Belgium is the most important country in this debate, he said. I spoke with the Prime Minister of Belgium. He explained me the problem. Also, other countries like Italy are changing their position. There will be negotiation until the last moment of council. Orban's reference to Belgium and Italy suggests the opposition to asset moves extends beyond the usual skeptics. If major Western European economies share legal and financial concerns, achieving consensus becomes significantly more difficult. Von der Leyen pushed for a decision to secure Ukraine's financing for the next 2 years, and leaders agreed a €90 billion loan package. This week's European Council is about facing the reality of the moment, the reality of a world that has become dangerous and transactional. A world of wars, a world of predators, she said. Von der Leyen's language reflects the stakes as seen from Brussels. For the Commission, failure to reach agreement on Ukraine funding would signal disunity at precisely the moment when Europe needs to project strength and resolve. Von der Leyen presented 2 paths forward. I propose 2 different options for this upcoming European Council, one based on assets and one based on EU borrowing. We will have to decide which way we want to take, which route we want to take, she said. The Commission pushed for a decision and ultimately leaders agreed on the €90 billion loan approach. The 2 options reflected the fundamental tension in Europe's approach. Using frozen assets directly would avoid new debt but carries legal risks. EU borrowing is legally straightforward but requires member states to accept financial liability. The loan plan is linked to immobilized Russian assets mainly as a potential repayment mechanism tied to future reparations, not direct confiscation. Von der Leyen noted one key decision has already been made. Last week, we agreed on the sustained immobilization of Russian assets. This is a decisive step that sends a very strong political message, she said. It means that the Russian assets will remain immobilized until we decide otherwise, until Russia stops the war, and until Russia pays duly reparations to Ukraine for the damage that is done. The immobilization decision is significant even if direct seizure remains contested. By keeping the assets frozen indefinitely, Europe retains leverage while avoiding the legal complications of outright confiscation. The question is whether this middle ground satisfies those pushing for more aggressive action. The row threatens unity ahead of the crucial EU summit. Leaders debated the loan proposal for Kyiv. The loan plan is linked to immobilized Russian assets mainly as a potential repayment mechanism tied to future reparations, not direct confiscation. Opposition remains strong, including in Belgium, where most of the assets are held. With divisions widening, Europe's Ukraine strategy strategy faced its most serious test yet. The summit revealed whether Europe could maintain a unified front on Ukraine or whether the cracks exposed in Germany's Bundestag extend across the continent. For Kyiv, the outcome will determine not just funding levels, but the strength of European commitment going forward. The debate in Germany's Bundestag reflects broader divisions across Europe. On one side, leaders like Merz argue that using immobilized Russian assets is necessary to pressure Putin and support Ukraine. On the other, critics warn of legal risks, economic damage, and what they call a failed diplomatic strategy. Hungary and Slovakia have made clear they will not support any plan that prolongs the conflict. Belgium and others have raised serious legal concerns. And within Germany itself, the AfD has launched fierce opposition, accusing the government of prioritizing Ukraine over German interests. The frozen assets debate is ultimately about more than money. It is about Europe's role in the world, its willingness to accept risk, and its vision for how the Ukraine conflict should end. Those fundamental questions remain unanswered. Leaders agreed on the €90 billion loan package. Whether Europe can maintain unity on implementation or which path it will take on the broader asset question remains the defining challenge ahead. The answer will shape not just Ukraine's future, but Europe's own.